Welcome to your complete beginner's guide for the DJI Osmo Mobile 6. This video is going to go through everything that you need to know about the gimbal, all the buttons on the gimbal, and how everything works in the app so that you can create interesting videos using your smartphone. Now, the point of a gimbal is to get super stable and smooth shots, but this gimbal also opens up a wide range of potential because it allows you to get those stable shots, but also gives you a lot more functionality than if you were just hand-holding your phone. With the Osmo Mobile 6, there are lots of features built into the app, and on the gimbal itself, there's even an extension rod so that you can get the camera out away from yourself and be able to do some interesting things with that longer stick. It's a small, compact gimbal, and it's super easy to keep with you whenever you're out filming. And there's two versions of this gimbal. There's the slate gray darker version, and there's the newer platinum gray lighter version. And recently, this gimbal has been upgraded with new ActiveTrack 6.0. So if you're a smartphone creator, or sometimes you just want to use your smartphone and get really stable footage, well, the gimbal is the perfect tool to be able to do that and be able to have with you wherever you go. Now, I just want to say a special thanks to DJI for sponsoring this video. Before we get into section 1, let me just give you an outline of what you're going to learn in this video. So in section 1, we're just gonna go through the initial setup, so how you use the gimbal, hooking up your phone, and some of the things that you need to do when you first pull the gimbal out of the box. The second section is gonna dig into how you actually use a gimbal, some things to think about your first time actually going out and filming with it. The third section will go into all of the buttons and everything that you're gonna find on the Osmo Mobile 6. And then the next section will dig into everything that you find in the DJI Mimo app. We'll go over everything on your filming screen, and then the section after that will go into your advanced menu, dig into some deeper settings that can help you when you're out filming. Now from there, we'll dig into the 4 different gimbal modes that you have available on this gimbal, and then we'll talk about how you actually walk with a gimbal and use a gimbal for longer periods of time so that you get smooth footage and it's not bumping up and down. Now from there, we'll go into all the other features with this gimbal. So we'll talk about photo modes, video options, slow motion options, the dynamic zoom option, time-lapse, hyperlapse, and then some automation that DJI gives you in this gimbal through the shot guides and the story mode. So there is a ton to unpack in this video, so let's get into section 1. So let's dive first into your initial setup. So when you first pull your gimbal out of the box, you're gonna have a few different components. You have the Osmo Mobile 6, which is gonna be folded up. You're gonna have a little tripod, which allows you to put the gimbal down, do some different shots, but also to set it up. And then you also have your phone clamp. So this is gonna go on your smartphone. Now you'll also have a cable to be able to charge this gimbal. There's a USB-C on the side of the gimbal, and you'll just plug that in to charge the gimbal. One thing I always recommend is before you're going out and filming, just make sure it's always charged. It does last a long time, but always keep it charged when you're out filming so you don't get midway through shooting and then you don't have your gimbal anymore. So you're just gonna wanna screw on the tripod on the bottom of your gimbal. To open it up, you're just gonna pull clockwise on the silver hinge, rotate it around, and then flip the gimbal up. It's really simple. And it's automatically gonna turn on when you do that. So this gimbal will automatically turn on and off when you fold it down and close it up. So super easy, you don't have to worry about this gimbal being on when it's in this folded mode, because it's always going to turn on and off when you open it and close it. Now, one thing to note, there are a bunch of stickers on this gimbal. You don't need to keep those on. So you can remove all of them just so it's clean and you don't have these stickers kind of floating around. Now, when you're setting up your phone, you're gonna see on the clip itself, there's a little camera icon with an arrow that shows which side of the clip you want your cameras on. So you see the little arrow, you put it around, and you wanna set the clip pretty much right in the center of your phone. Now with the gimbal, you need to make sure that everything's balanced properly, because if it's not, the gimbal's not gonna function as it needs to. It's not gonna get you smooth footage. So you wanna find the point of your phone where it's the most balanced from left to right. Now when I stuck this on the gimbal, it's powered off because the gimbal's been sitting here for a minute. So it is gonna auto shut off after a little bit. And if you look at your gimbal, there's an M button. You're gonna press and hold that, it's gonna power on your gimbal. So you could either have it set up to where the gimbal's gonna automatically turn on when you open it, but if you do have your gimbal open and it's off, you just press and hold the power button and it's gonna turn on and off your gimbal. Now to make sure that your clip is placed in the right spot and it's balanced properly, what you'll do is you'll mount it onto the gimbal and then put the phone horizontal and let go. If the mount's in the wrong spot, you're gonna see the phone drop. And so that means you're not in the center of balance, and so you could have issues with your gimbal when you turn it on. It might not function properly. So you could just slide your phone in this mount until you find that center of balance where the phone doesn't drop too much to one direction. Doesn't have to be perfect, but ideally you want to have it so that when you're in that center of balance, put your phone horizontal and it just sits there. It's not going to move either direction. And so once your phone is balanced, you could just press and hold the M button to turn on your gimbal. Now, as I said earlier, when you open and close your gimbal, it's going to turn on, but you can also press and hold the M button and it's also going to turn on and off your gimbal. Now, if your gimbal's automatically turned on and you put your phone in here, it's going to automatically start using it. So to check your balance, you would have it on, press and hold your M button to turn it off, and then go through and just make sure that the camera is balanced properly. Press and hold the M button, turn back on. So it's just something to keep in mind. You want to make sure that it's balanced. And after doing this once, it'll be much easier to just put the clip exactly where you need to go to have it balanced to ready to start shooting. Now, the next thing you need to do is set up the DJI Mimo app. So you're going to download DJI Mimo. This is what you use with the Osmo Mobile 6. Now, once the app is loaded into your phone, you're going to power on the gimbal and turn on the app. Make sure your Bluetooth is turned on your phone, and at the top of your screen, you'll see this bar pop up for the Osmo Mobile 6 and asking you to connect. So just make sure you hit connect and follow on screen to go through and activate your Osmo Mobile 6. And once you've gone through this process, it'll take you to the camera screen, or if you're back at this main menu screen, you'll just want to tap this camera in the upper left-hand corner. Now, the first thing you want to do is open up your camera screen and see if there's any updates. This is something you want to look for whenever you turn on your gimbal. And so you'll see this little yellow box that says update. Make sure you click here to update the gimbal to the most current firmware to make sure that you have access to all the features and everything's going to be working properly. Okay, so now that you've gone through, you've downloaded your Mimo app, you've activated it, you've updated it, your gimbal is ready to start using. So let's just jump into the next section, which is some basics on how to use a gimbal and how you're going to start working with this super fast. So let's just go over some of the basics of a gimbal and why you would want to use a gimbal in the first place, because phones have good stabilization. However, this gives you the ability to hold your camera with one hand and also extend it away from you. So you could use it like this. You could switch the camera and film yourself and get a nice vlog shot for whatever situation that you're filming in. So the point of a gimbal isn't necessarily just smoothness, it's also ease of use. And also with the Osmo Mobile 6, you have the selfie stick. So you could get shots even further away from yourself and get this nice wide angle. You know, you could shoot vlog style content, super easy, be able to film it in this way where, you know, you're walk and talk and you have the camera extended out. You don't have to like stretch out your arm like this to be able to get a good shot. Hands down by my side, getting a great shot of myself. And also you have tracking. So right now the camera's tracking wherever I go and it's always going to keep me in the frame. So it's not just about smooth footage. Yes, your camera can get smooth footage and you can just hand hold it, but adding a gimbal gives you even more stable footage, but also it just gives you more flexibility. Now, one of the big things when working with a gimbal is your horizon lock. So you can see right here, let's flip over to video mode. As I move around, the gimbal is always going to keep the horizon completely level. When you're working with just your hands on your phone, you might have that horizon shift left and right. Whereas when I'm working with a gimbal, I'm moving around here. I'm just going to film the camera over here. No matter what movement I do, even if it's not the best move in the world, my horizon is always going to be level. So you have this added layer of stability that's a lot harder to achieve when you're hand holding your camera. And so when you're operating with this gimbal, you're either going to be using it one hand, just like this, walking around, or if you have this tripod on the bottom while you're filming, you can use two hands, and it does make it a lot easier to be stable with your footage. And then also you could set this down on a table, on the ground, and you could get some different style shots where you could walk away from your phone. And so those are some of the big advantages in just the initial way that you're going to use this gimbal. Oftentimes when working with a gimbal, you'll just keep it here, walking around, getting stable shots. And I'll show you a little bit later how you could actually use this gimbal and get stable shots when you're walking so that it's not bouncing up and down, because with a lightweight setup, especially on a gimbal, you'll see a lot of your walking motion if you don't hold the gimbal in the right way. But before we get into all of these techniques, let's dive into the menu so you have an understanding of what you get in this gimbal. And then we'll come back out here and we'll do some more with actually working with this gimbal and moving around with it so that you can get much more comfortable actually using this and getting stable footage. So for this next section, we're going to go over everything that you find on the gimbal itself. Now, we've already connected the phone and played with it for a little bit. However, when you look up near where you connect your clamp to the actual gimbal itself, there's a little thread mount. Now, this is for counterweight. So if you have a bigger phone and you can't get it balanced properly and you're having some issues with it being a little bit wobbly, you might need a counterweight. And those are just gonna screw in right here on this thread mount. Then that allows you to get that phone balanced horizontally when you let go of it. Now let's go over the controls that you find on the gimbal itself. So right here on the front, you'll have this little screen with your M button. Now, as I said earlier, M, if you press and hold, is gonna power off and power on your gimbal. However, if you just click it once, it's gonna cycle through the 4 different gimbal modes. And in one of the next sections, we'll go over each one of those gimbal modes and how you can use it to get smooth footage. Now you're also gonna have a little indicator here that shows your battery and how much battery you have on the gimbal itself. Now above the battery indicator, there's a status button that gives you information about the gimbal itself. And so you can see right here on screen, if it's solid yellow, that means the Bluetooth is disconnected. If it's solid green, that means the Bluetooth is connected. If it pulses yellow or pulses green, it's in standby mode. If it blinks red and green back and forth, then it means that there's a firmware update that's needed or the firmware update failed. And if it's solid red, then there's something going on with the gimbal and it's abnormal. So you'll want to shut it down and turn it back on and see if that red goes away. Now also with this mode button, if your gimbal is turned off, you can press it once and it'll show you how much battery is on the gimbal without having to turn it on. Now also with this mode button, when it's powered on, you can press it 3 times and it will go into standby mode and the motors will disengage. Now you press any button on the gimbal and the motors will re-engage. Now underneath the mode button, you have your record. So depending on whether you're in photo or video mode, you press this, it's gonna start recording or take a photo. Now when you're in photo mode, if you press and hold this, it's gonna do a burst photo. So it'll take a series of photos back to back. Now underneath this button, you have your switch button. It's gonna have the 2 arrows on it. So you press this once, it's gonna switch between your front camera and your rear camera. So if you wanna do some vlog style content, you'll press this once, it'll start filming you. Press it once again, it'll film what's in front of the camera. Now if you press this twice, it's gonna switch between landscape and portrait mode. So it'll go from horizontal to vertical. And you can press this button 3 times and it'll switch between photo and video mode. So a few different functions with this button. Now next to these 3 buttons, you'll see your joystick. And the joystick is just gonna control where the gimbal is looking. So you could just move this around and it's gonna move the camera around. And you'll use this when you're filming, but also to set up different shots in some of the different modes. Now on the side of this gimbal, you'll see that there's this little wheel. So this is either focus or zoom. And you'll see on the app itself, it will tell you whether it's focus or zoom. And so when you're in the zoom mode, you could twist this and it's gonna zoom the camera in and out. Now you could press in the middle, you'll hear a click, and then it will turn to focus mode. And then when you twist it, it's gonna be in manual focus mode, so you can manually adjust where you want your focus to be in the frame. Now the last button that you have on this gimbal is your trigger. So you can press this once and it's gonna start your active track. And it's gonna grab whatever subject is in the middle of your frame and it's gonna start tracking that subject. Now you'll press twice on this trigger to recenter the gimbal. So if your gimbal is shifted kind of up and over to the side, you'll double press this and it will recenter back to the middle. Now you hold the trigger and it's gonna go into lock mode. And I'll show you that when we get into the gimbal modes. And if you press once and then hold, it's gonna go into fast mode. Again, I'll show you this when we get into the gimbal modes section. Now the last thing that you have on the gimbal itself is your USB-C for charging. And then you have your Q20 on the bottom to be able to put this on a tripod or to put your little tabletop tripod on so that you could set this gimbal anywhere and have it be upright. So that's everything on the gimbal itself. Next, let's talk about tracking, because the tracking in this gimbal is really good. You can go behind objects and the gimbal's gonna continue to track you. So in the Osmo Mobile 6, you have Active Track 6.0. You need to make sure that you're updated to the newest firmware because the tracking has been updated to 6.0 since the initial launch of this gimbal. And there's 2 different ways that you can track yourself. So first, let me just show you the tracking on the front-facing camera. All right, so I've switched over to just using my phone and I'm tracking myself. So I'm using that front-facing camera to track myself. Flies are attacking me. But whenever you flip the camera on yourself, you can have it set up to where it automatically starts tracking. Now, if you didn't have this turned on, so let's say tracking's turned off, all you'd have to do is draw a box around yourself and then you can start tracking. Now moving on to the back camera, you can track any person or object that you want, and it's pretty easy to use. All you need to do is select your subject by drawing a box around them. It's gonna automatically start tracking. Now what's cool with tracking in the Osmo Mobile 6 is that you don't always have to keep your subject centered. So if you push the joystick in any direction, you can change where you want your subject to be tracked from. So you can see in this example, I have my subject moved off to the right third, and she's gonna stay continually tracked in that right third instead of being right in the center. Now, as I move with my subject, the gimbal's gonna make sure that my tracking point stays in the same part of the frame as I move the gimbal around. Now, what's really cool with Active Track 6.0 is that if my subject goes behind something like one of these trees, the gimbal's gonna continue to track and then find that subject on the other side once she's visible again. And you can see how well this works in this park setting. So I'm tracking her through this park, and there's a ton of things between me and the person that I'm tracking, but as I move with the gimbal, it continually follows until it catches up with her on the other side of this play structure. So as you're tracking, you'll be able to grab your subject, be able to move them around the frame, be able to keep them centered as you move the gimbal so that you don't always have to focus on where you're pointing the gimbal. Tracking just makes working with a gimbal so much easier when you're trying to follow a subject. Now the next section, let's talk about parents and kid mode. So this is a new update with the DJI Osmo Mobile 6, and so make sure you're on the most current firmware to be able to access this. So on this bar where you could select between photo, video, slow motion, all the different features, there's now a parent and kids mode. So what this mode allows you to do is be completely hands-free, and the AI is gonna track your movements with whoever's in the shot, and then cut together a fun little video. So I just set the gimbal down in the corner of the room, extended the selfie stick so there's more range when I'm using this mode, and then I just hit record. And the camera's gonna auto adjust and do some different movements throughout a 10-minute period. And it's just gonna follow the action of whatever we're doing. So I'm just hanging out here with my son, playing around with some toys, and the gimbal's gonna be continually just doing different things and capturing some different moments throughout these 10 minutes of us playing together. Now, once it's done, you're gonna hear a beep, and that indicates that the recording has stopped. Now you'll bring all these shots into DJI's Light Cut, and then you could use the AI in this editing software and to be able to go through and make a fun little video that you can share on your social media. So you can make it 16:9 or 9:16, whether you want it horizontal or vertical. And then you could go through and delete clips or change durations of clips, or you could even do things like add text or stickers or just anything on the frame, and even change some of the color and the look so that you can create a custom video and make it exactly how you want it. And so the process is you let the AI go through and build your video, and then you can go in and fine tune it. So go through and cut out clips, add your text, trim things up, add a color effect, and then you export it. And now you have a video file that you can share. And it's even gonna include music so your video's ready to post. And so you can see here are the two variations, one 9:16 and one 16:9 of the little video that was created for me while we were playing with some toys. All right, so let's talk about gimbal modes, because you have 6 different gimbal modes that you can use with the Osmo Mobile 6. 4 of them are right here with that M button on the front, and then you have 2 others depending on if you want to lock or move faster with the gimbal. So the first mode, which has 2 loops on it, you'll see it right here on the front, that's basically follow all. So what that means is that anywhere that you point this gimbal, the camera's gonna follow. So if I'm looking out this way over that dry brush over there, well, if I tilt the gimbal forward, the camera's gonna follow me down. And if I tilt the gimbal up, well, the camera's gonna follow me up. And if I pan left with my body and the gimbal, well, the camera's gonna follow. And if I pan right, the camera's gonna follow as well. So it's a follow all mode. So any direction that you go, the gimbal's gonna follow. So if I'm pointing at this tree, I could start in the sky, pan down to the tree, and then pan right to the path. It's just gonna follow wherever you want it to go. And when you're using these gimbal modes, you're gonna rotate and pivot the gimbal with your wrists, or you could use your whole body and rotate. It's gonna be smoother if you do bigger motions with your body, but if you do just use your wrist, you could spin it as well and tilt. So how you're gonna work with this gimbal is gonna be just a combination of using your body and your wrists to be able to move this, try to make it as smooth as possible. The next mode, you're just gonna click once on the mode button. It's gonna be tilt lock mode. Now if I tilt forward or up, the camera's not gonna follow. However, if I rotate, pivot, well, the camera's gonna follow horizontally. So this is a mode that I like to use all the time because it keeps your horizon level, and then you can pivot left or right depending on what you're filming, and you don't have to worry about having the camera dip forward or dip up. Sometimes I don't want that motion of going down and up, and all I want is to keep the camera looking forward, but I want to pivot left or right. So this is a tilt lock mode. So I'm just going to show you kind of a shot of this area, and I'm going to pan over. So I'm going to start in this empty brush with the trail out there, and I'm going to pan to my right. And that way the only motion is a left to right pivot rather than having some tilt happen in that shot. Now the next mode is going to be the FPV mode. So now you could move the same way that your follow all mode, that first mode that we talked about, but you could also rotate. So your axis will change, twisting left and right. So this doesn't keep your horizon level. And this is kind of fun to play with because you could do these kind of cool shots where you're rotating around and the horizon shifting. And it just gives you a different perspective. I've definitely used this style of FPV mode depending on what I'm shooting. If I want something that just has more of this dynamic feel where you have a lot of rotation in your shot. Now the last mode is spin shot. So this is the same as FPV. So the gimbal's gonna work the same. However, now the joystick, when you press left or right in the joystick, it's gonna spin the camera. So if you wanna do a shot where you're like corkscrewing around, you could just use the joystick and walk forward, and it's gonna spin as you move. So you're using that joystick to be able to do your twisting rotation versus having to do it this way with your arm. So if you do want like that spinning shot where you're going down a hallway or through some interesting area, well, you could use it doing the joystick. Now in all the other modes, the joystick does panning left and right and tilting up and down. So the only mode where it actually creates that spin is the spin shot. Now with all of your modes, you just double click your trigger, it goes back to center so that you can always have a good shot to start with. Now the next mode is lock mode, and that's where it locks all the motors and the camera, it just stays looking forward. And to do this mode, you just hold the trigger. Now any motion that I do with the gimbal, the camera's gonna stay locked looking forward. And this works with any mode that you're in. So if you wanna like lock the shot looking this way, you don't want to have any twisting motion happening, you could hold. Now as I twist, you could see that, well, the camera's not twisting. And I could walk and just do a nice side slide style shot where only axis that I'm moving is to the right. Whereas if I tried to do that with say tilt lock mode on or follow all, you might have the camera dipping, you might have the camera twisting. So you could really create these very specific movements when you put it in the lock mode. And no matter how you use the gimbal, the camera's always gonna stay looking forward. Now the last mode is also using the trigger. So you press once and then hold, and now any motion is gonna happen super fast. So whatever mode you're in, it just speeds up that motion so that the camera follows super quick. So if you wanna do like a fast whip into the scene, like say I'm starting over here, I press and hold, and I can whip it in to the camera over there and then whip it out. So you can use this to do some cool transitions where you're whipping, or if you just want fast motion through your scene, say you're following like someone on a bike and they're coming down the path here, and then you whip around to follow them go that way. Well, that might be a good mode to use to be able to follow quick action. So there's a lot of just flexibility to use these 6 different modes. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna link to another one of my videos where I use the DJI Osmo Mobile 6, and I show you a bunch of different gimbal moves using these different modes so that you can get some creative footage when you're out filming. But using these 6 modes give you a lot of interesting ways to play with this gimbal and be able to move it so that you could get some good looking shots. I highly suggest go out somewhere like this, and if you're out by yourself, just find something to shoot like a tree or these kind of columns over here and play with the different modes and put each one on and see how they react and how you move the gimbal and what your limitations are. Because ultimately, gimbals are great, but they're not perfect. So you're gonna have to play with the limitations and figure out how fast you can move with the gimbal before the shot doesn't look that great anymore. So really just go out there, film a ton of footage and just start playing with it. And that's how you're gonna get used to using all these modes and figure out when you'll want to use one mode versus another. Okay, so now let's go over everything in the DJI Mimo app so you understand what everything means on the screen when you're out filming. So once you've powered on your gimbal and you have your screen up, this is what you're gonna see. We're just here in my office right now, so you can see that my view is of you, the camera, over there on the wall. I'm gonna switch this to horizontal mode, by just double pressing the switch icon, just so that you can see this full frame, and you'll see that all the data automatically readjusts. So whether you're working vertical or you're in horizontal, you'll be able to have a clear view of everything on your screen. Now, starting in the upper left-hand corner, this is your home button. So this just goes back to that home screen of the DJI Mimo app. So you could go through and there's things like your AI editor, your support, your DJI forum. There's Academy up in the upper right-hand corner, which gives you some different guides and things to think about when you're out filming. And at the bottom, you'll see your home, your album, your editor, and your profile for the profile that you've set up with DJI. We're gonna go back into the device by clicking the camera in the upper left-hand corner. Now, next to your home icon is your shot guide, and I'll explain how shot guide works a little bit later in this video. Now, next to that, you'll see some information at the upper right-hand corner. The first is the battery of your gimbal. The next is the battery of your phone. The one next to that with the little lightning bolt, that's your flash. So if you're using the flash in your camera, or if you have your light on, you'll have a different indication here. Next to that is the gimbal mode that you're currently in. So this will change depending on the mode that you have set up. And then next to that is your zoom or focus. So I'll switch this. It'll say whether you're in manual focus or you are in zoom. So whatever mode that you're using with this little dial on the left-hand side of your gimbal, you'll see it indicated up there on the screen. Now, next to that is your camera icon with the two arrows. This will rotate so you could do shot of me, and it's going to automatically start tracking me when I go into this vlog mode, or I'll go back to you in front of camera. So you could either press it here on the screen, or you could press once on the actual gimbal itself, and it's gonna be doing the same thing. And one thing to note when it comes to actually working with this gimbal, whenever you flip to vlog mode, it will automatically start tracking you. You can turn this off, but it's a pretty cool feature because it's gonna automatically start tracking as soon as you flip it. So I'll flip back to you, the camera over there, flip back to me, and it's gonna start tracking me. And now I could just talk directly to this camera and you'll see me through the screen. You can see a little bit behind the scenes of my office. Now, moving right along down, you'll see this big white button. This takes a photo. Now, if you're in a different mode, say video mode, I'm gonna switch over to video mode, that will start recording. And when you're recording, you're gonna have a few indications pop up. Up at the top, you'll see that now it's telling you how long your camera is recording for, and it also shows your audio levels. So you can see when I'm talking really loud, how it goes all the way up to the right, but if I stop talking, and so to stop recording, you're just gonna click the square on the right-hand side. Now, next to the red button or the white button, depending on which mode you're in, you'll have all of your different modes. So you have your story mode. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You have panoramic, photo, video, slow motion, dynamic zoom, time lapse, and hyperlapse. So you could go through all the different modes of shooting by just adjusting here on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can slide your finger up and down to move through them fast. Now, underneath the white circle or red circle, there's a gesture control. And so you could set this up so to do like a gesture, and then it's gonna start shooting. So I just put my hand up, now it's recording using the gesture controls. Super useful because you could have this camera set up at a distance, put my hand up, and it's gonna start controlling. So now I'm recording, I don't have to be near the camera, walking away, it's gonna track me. And you can see that this gimbal is gonna track you wherever you go. Now, underneath that, the little play button, that is your album, and this shows you all the videos that you've shot using this gimbal. And when we go into this screen, you can see that it's set up between photos, videos, favorites, shot reel, and you could go through and save them or delete them, look at previous videos. So it just goes through your entire library of what you've shot. Now, moving to the center, you'll see this little icon that says 1 with the X. This is the lens that you're currently using. So on my camera here, I have 3 different lenses, and I could zoom by pulling left or right on this little bar that pops up when I press and hold in the middle of the screen. Now, if I want to make sure I'm just using one of the 3 lenses, I could just press the little white dots and it's going to bounce between the 3 lenses that I have on this phone. So it really depends on which phone you're using, but this gives you that ability to be able to jump between your different lenses. Now, underneath that, you'll see your different camera settings. So it's saying that I'm shooting at a 1/48 with an ISO of 631, and my exposure compensation is at 0. And so right now it's just set to auto, but I can switch this camera over to manual, and I'll show you where in a second. Now, when you're in auto mode, you could just click on your screen like in your normal phone app, and you could set your exposure, and you can make it brighter or darker. You could press and hold to lock your exposure. And then you can use the little sun icon on the side to make it brighter or darker. Now, moving over to the left in the bottom left-hand corner, this is your advanced menu settings. And we'll go over that in the next section. Above that is a face filter. So you can click this, and it's going to be able to give you some different tuning for your face. So let's switch the camera back to me, have it start tracking me, and let's put auto. So it's instantly starting to smooth my face out. I can slim my face, I can make it super slim, I can make it super soft, and that is overdoing it. So you could go through and you could use this glamour effect to be able to soften up your face if you want just a little bit of a softer look, and you could play with these settings to figure out what looks best for you. I'm gonna turn that off. I'm just gonna look rough here. Now, above your glamour shot, in photo mode, you'll see that this is a timer. So you could click this and you could say, I wanna take a photo in 3 seconds. So you'll set up your timer to be able to take time shots. Now, when you switch over to other modes, this will switch. So now, when I go to video mode, this is gonna show me my settings for video. So it could show my resolution and the frames per second that I wanna shoot at. So 24, 25, 30, and 60 in this phone. So I can shoot at 4K, 60 frames per second. I can set that all up here. Now, moving up the screen, you'll see that there's this little camera icon and it says auto. So we're in auto settings right now, but if you click this, you could set manual by clicking the M. So now you could set your ISO, your shutter. So if you wanna go full manual, you'll take your ISO, you'll switch it to an ISO and change your shutter to something that you think looks good. And the little indication in the bottom where it says EV is gonna tell you how much over or underexposed your footage is. Now, if you wanna go to auto ISO, it's gonna switch to give you your max ISO that you wanna be able to use on your camera. So if you don't wanna go above, say, 400, and then you can adjust your shutter, and the ISO is gonna adjust independently. So if you're someone who wants to use cinematic settings and use double that of your frame rate for your shutter speed, well, I could set my shutter at 1/60th because I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, set my ISO to auto, and then you'll see in the EV, it shows you how much overexposed or underexposed your footage is. Now, when you go back to auto, it's gonna go back to full auto settings on this camera. And you could use the plus and minus to overexpose or underexpose your footage. So you could press the plus icon, go up to 1 stop over, and the exposure will go up 1 stop from where the camera thinks best exposure is. You can do the same thing with underexposed. So you can make it a little bit darker. So if your footage is too bright or too dark, you can go in here and mess with that EV to be able to get your footage looking better in the situation that you're filming. Or you could go over to full manual mode and tweak the different settings to find what works best for you. If you're trying to get proper motion blur, then you would go over to manual, set your shutter speed, and then either set ISO to auto or set it manually, and then you'll be able to get proper motion blur if that's something that you care about. Now, that's everything on the screen itself. So you have a lot of tools and functions available for you when you're filming just right here on the screen. Now, the next section, we're gonna go into more of the advanced settings. Now, for this next section, we're gonna go into those 3 dots in the lower left-hand corner. So let's click those. I'm in photo mode. And so when you click this, on the right-hand side will be your main menu, and then there's gonna be all of these options off to the right of that. So when you're in photo mode, you'll have some different options pop up here specific to photo mode. So every mode that you go in, say you're in video mode, this first menu is gonna change. So when I go to video mode, click on that first icon, all of these settings are specific to that video mode. So whenever mode you're in, you'll have some additional settings in this advanced menu. So when we go through each mode in this gimbal, I'll talk about these advanced settings and what you can do for each mode. But let's click the second one, which is your gimbal settings. And this is gonna be the same across all of the different modes. So right at the top, it says Gimbal Quick Start Guide. So if you're not sure how something works, you can click into this and there will be more information about how to use this gimbal and some of the different buttons and everything like that. So you always have some education at your fingertips when you're working with this gimbal. Now, underneath that, you'll see it says Gimbal Mode. So these are the 4 different gimbal modes that you have access to on the actual gimbal itself. Now, underneath that is your gimbal auto calibration. And so when your gimbal's all set up and you're ready to go, you could hit start and it's just gonna go through and calibrate your gimbal so that you're getting the smoothest footage possible when you're out filming. So I suggest when you put your phone on for the first time for the day, you go through, do a calibration just to make sure everything's functioning properly. That way you can get the best footage out of this gimbal. Now the next option is horizontal gimbal adjustment. So if you're having issues with your horizon being a little bit off, you can go in here and it's gonna help tweak your gimbal to be able to get your horizon looking perfect. And what you'll see is these little grid lines to help you line up your gimbal to make sure it's perfectly level. Now when you hit OK, you could go through and adjust. So even if your gimbal is set up perfectly and you still have a tilt, you can change your tilt by adding or subtracting either direction, and the gimbal will rotate a little bit to fix that horizon. Now the next option is for your side wheel mode. So you could have it set to zoom or manual focus. You could do that by also just pressing on the button, or you could just turn this off if you don't want to use it. Now underneath that is your custom mode. So right now, when you press your switch button 3 times, it switches between photo and video mode. You can also have this set up to go to your quick menu. So let's turn on quick menu, press our button 3 times, and this gives you the ability to switch quickly between any of the modes. And you could use your joystick to switch between your filming modes, your gimbal modes, and it also shows your previous shot. Now back in the advanced menus, you'll see that there's an option for your joystick speed. So this is how fast the gimbal responds when you press on your joystick. So if you want subtle motion, move it to slow. But if you want it to respond quickly, move it to fast. Now also you have joystick control. And with joystick control, you have free or horizontal and vertical. In free, the gimbal will follow exactly where you point the joystick. Whereas in horizontal and vertical, it's only gonna move it left or right or up or down. So if you press it to one of the diagonals, the camera's not gonna move towards the diagonal. It will only move left or right or up or down, and it will stay in that motion. Might be useful depending on what you're shooting. Now you could also invert your joystick direction and your wheel direction here in this menu. And then the last option is your extended tilt control. So you can turn this on, you'll have more functionality with your tilt. However, it turns off your horizontal direction. So it only allows you to tilt up and down, and it just gives you more range with that tilt up and down. Now in your main menus on the left, you'll click the one with the 4 boxes, and this will give you some info about the device itself. You could set up your sleep mode, so how long until the gimbal shuts off, and you could just disable this, or you could have a minute, 3 minutes, or 10 minutes. There is a beginner tutorial in here, and then there's also this quick launch at the bottom. And so as soon as you turn on your gimbal and hook up your phone, it could launch the Mimo app so you could start using this gimbal super fast. So if you want to turn that on, you'll do it here in this menu. Now that's everything with the DJI Mimo app, and we'll go over the advanced menu for each filming mode when we talk about each mode, so you can see what functions you have when you're doing photo, video, hyperlapse, or anything like that. All right, so now that we've gone through the app, let's go through some different ways to actually use this gimbal and understand how to get some smooth footage when you're out filming. So understanding how your gimbal works is one piece of the puzzle. And the second part is actually how you move with a gimbal. Because let me show you 2 samples here. First, I'm gonna walk over here and I'm gonna put this on the wide lens, and I'm just gonna record, and I'm just gonna walk without any kind of intention on how I'm using this gimbal. And you can see as I'm moving through this path, I'm just kind of following wherever I'm going. You could see the footage, it's not the best because I'm not really paying attention to my movements. I'm just walking with the gimbal, and I'm walking around this structure, and I'm just kind of pointing it where I think I want to go. And it doesn't really look that good. Unfortunately, just because you're using a gimbal doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get good footage. If you're just putting it in the follow all mode and walking around and kind of looking over here and then looking down here and just kind of moving the camera and just like thinking that it's gonna get good shots when you're pointing it in all these different places, well, it's not. You gotta think like a cinematographer, think like a filmmaker. You wanna have intention with your shots, especially when you're working with a gimbal, because it's gonna come out looking much better when you actually put some focus and you do specific movements with everything that you're doing. And on top of that, you have to be able to move with intention so that you're not getting that bounce up and down in your footage. When you walk with a gimbal, and the gimbal will bounce, and you'll see this up and down motion because the motors are getting rid of shake left and right and tilting, but it's not getting shake away from this. Let me go over how you actually walk with a gimbal. So when you normally walk, you have a little bit of bounce to your step, and your phone is gonna move up and down. So when you work with a gimbal, ideally you wanna try to keep the gimbal in a straight line. So it's not going up, it's not going down. And so to take out that bounce, you're gonna use your body. And there's 2 ways to do this. First is what's called a ninja walk. So you're gonna get down low and you're gonna creep along, keeping your upper body in the same plane of motion the entire time. That way your gimbal's not bouncing up and down. Now the other way is to do a heel toe. So you're gonna stand more upright and you're gonna be very intentional with your movements of your lower body, and you're gonna try to keep your arms in a straight line no matter what you're doing. Now, both ways work great. The ninja walk, you can only do for short periods of time. So you're gonna get a little bit down low, you might hunch over. With the heel toe, you might walk slower, but you also could do this for longer periods of time. So either way will work, it just depends on what you're filming. Like there's been times where I've been running fast and I use the ninja walk because it's a lot easier to get these quick motions and be able to keep the gimbal completely stable, especially when on a long lens. But there's also times where I'm doing something where I'm walking through like a house and I wanna make sure the footage is completely smooth the entire way, but I don't wanna be hunched over that whole time. So I'll use the heel toe method and walk a little slower. Both work great. And so let's walk around this structure one more time, make a few different shots out of it to cut it together, and walk with intention so there's no bounce. So first, I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna see this structure. I'm gonna put it on the wide lens, and I'm just gonna do a push forward. Now the next shot, I wanna show some detail. So instead of moving around the columns, I'm gonna pick a spot and just tilt from high to low. So I'm gonna switch out my mode to follow all mode, start up here and just slowly tilt down. So I'm gonna find a good position, plant my feet so that I'm not shifting, and then I'm gonna start looking up, just slowly tilt down. The third shot would be from the backside, revealing this tree that's over here. So I'm gonna move again, and instead of doing like a walking through like the last time I did this, I'm gonna do a slide shot. So I'm gonna lock the gimbal. I'm gonna come over here. You can see you guys are over there, but I wanna reveal what's behind this. So I'm gonna press and hold, lock it. I'm gonna use my ninja walk to the side. I'm gonna reveal the scene on the other side of these columns. And so now, instead of just like wandering around the structure and being like, oh, this is cool, I have 3 distinct shots that I could cut together in a quick little sequence. It's gonna look really nice in the edit and a lot more cinematic. And each shot's gonna be smoother because each one had intent behind it, whether I was moving or planted my feet and just moved the gimbal. So I challenge you, when you're working with your gimbal, have more intention with every shot. So think through what you're actually gonna use this for and come up with a few interesting moves that you could do, and your different ways that you've set up your gimbal, the different modes, the different settings, the speeds, are all tools that you could use to get better, stable shots. But just because you put your phone on a gimbal doesn't mean you're gonna get the best shots in the world. All about just thinking through your shots a little bit more before you hit record. And this tool allows you to get even better shots when you do that. All right, so let's go through the different modes that you have access to when working with the Osmo Mobile 6. So photo and video are standard. That's what you'd think to use with a gimbal. However, there are some options in each one of these that's gonna expand what you could do with these different modes. So in photo mode, as I mentioned earlier, you have your time shot here on the left. Now, when we click the advanced menu, the 3 dots, you have access to change things like your frame. So you could change if you want a 4:3, 16:9, 18:9, or 1:1. You could also turn on your flash. So you can have your flash when you take a photo, or you could have it always on if you just want your light always on the camera. Now you could change your white balance and make it manual if you set up your manual settings. Right now it's just on auto because I'm using auto settings. Now you could also set up your grid when you're using photos. So you could have grid lines, which give you your thirds, which is a good way to frame your subject, whatever it is that you're photographing. You could do grids and diagonals so you could see your center point and also your thirds. And you also have this option at the bottom to do face track selfies. So if I switch this around to me, it's gonna automatically track my face, take a photo. Now I'm gonna switch over to video mode. So in video mode, you're shooting real-time footage. This isn't slow motion. There's a different menu for slow motion. But you go to this 3 dots. You could turn on your light, which is called your flash in here. You could change your white balance. You could do the same grids. And you could also do the same face track selfie. So when you rotate to yourself, it's gonna be tracking me. And then also you have Dolby Vision, which allows for HDR if you wanna shoot in that way. And there's also this option for auto shot guides. It'll tell you a shot guide that you could use when you're out filming in a specific situation. Now, another mode that you have access to is panoramic. So this takes a series of photos and stitches them together so you can create a nice wide shot of the place that you're in. So I'm gonna switch over to panoramic, and on the left-hand side, you'll have this icon with the grid. Click that, it shows you the different styles of panoramics that you can take. So I'm just gonna do this first one, and I'm gonna take panoramic. So the gimbal's automatically gonna move, and it's gonna take a series of photos, and then it's gonna stitch it together. Now, it's a good idea when you're doing panoramic to put your gimbal on the tripod and set it down, because you don't want to have the gimbal moving around when you're doing the panoramic. And then it's gonna go through, it's gonna generate the panoramic, and now it's stitched together a wide shot of the location that we're at. So there's some different panoramic modes that you could play around with to get these nice wide shots that are even wider than your widest camera on your phone. Now, when you go into your advanced menus for these, you have the same options with your flash, white balance, and grid, but you also have this option to save unstitched photos. So whenever it takes the series of 9 photos, you could save each one of those individually as well as the panoramic that it stitches together for you. Now, the next mode is your dynamic zoom. So this, it's gonna zoom while you physically move the camera in or out. This creates that stretching effect that's kind of like the Hitchcock effect that you've seen in movies. Now, when you're in the dynamic zoom, at the top, you'll have this move out or move in. So you could switch back and forth between those. And in your advanced menu, you just have flash, white balance, and your grid. So let's go to time lapse. So time lapse creates a series of photos and then stretches it together so you can show the movement of time. When you click on time lapse, a new bar will pop up at the top, and it has this little drop down menu. So you could show how long you want your time lapse to be. You could set your intervals. Every half a second it takes a photo, and then you could do fixed angle, left to right, right to left, or custom motion. And so this is pretty cool because the gimbal will rotate left to right or right to left while it's doing the time lapse, or you could set up a direction that you want to go. And so let's say I want to start here on this tree and then move up to the clouds. I just hit that plus icon for every movement that I want to have happen, and then the gimbal is going to automatically move between these points while it's doing the time lapse. And then when it's done, it's going to return back to home, and it's going to auto stitch that video together. So you could go in your videos, hit play, and it shows the time lapse. And so use this to do some really cool motion with like clouds moving over long periods of time. And you could do these different motions, whether camera's stable, moves left to right, right to left, or you set up a custom motion for your time lapse. Now, the next mode is hyperlapse. So a hyperlapse is a moving time lapse. And so that's like actually walking through a scene. And so I could set up the hyperlapse. You could set up your resolution and your speed. So it could be auto, 5x, 10x, 15x, 30x. And then for your advanced menus, you have the same flash, white balance, grid, but you also could do a face track selfies. So you could do a time lapse of yourself like this, moving through a scene. And then when you hit record, it's gonna take a series of photos over a period of time and then stitch them together to create your hyperlapse. Now, the last mode that you have access to is your shot guides and your story mode. So with the story mode, you go to this menu and it's gonna have these different automations that you could shoot depending on the location that you're in. And it comes with music and some text and everything to make just a quick little video wherever you're at. So let's choose afternoon. And when you select one of these stories, it's gonna have music and it's gonna go through a series of shots with specific time frames, and the gimbal's gonna do some automations. So for this one that I chose, it's doing whip pans in and out of each section, and then it cuts it all together for you. So it gives you a little timer until it's gonna shoots the shot, and then it moves on to the next one. And this is an easy way to use the DJI Mimo app to just create fun little videos, and it adds music to it and it cuts it for you so you could post it right away. Now, the last mode that you have access to is shot guides. So this is a little bit different than story mode. It's in the upper left-hand corner. When you click this, you could go through a bunch of different types of sequences. So I'm gonna go to park. And what this does is it comes up with a series of shots that you can use at a specific location as a guide to help you create this video. So I just chose leaves, and it's gonna go through, show you how the shot should look and show you how to shoot it over here on the left. And so for this first shot, it says just go look at some leaves. And so it will go shot by shot and show you every shot that you need to do to create this interesting sequence. And it shows you how the shot should look and how you should move the gimbal to be able to achieve that shot. So if you want some tips on how to create some cool looking sequences, well, refer to the shot guides and play around with some different options depending on the scene that you're filming in. And that is everything that you need to know about the DJI Osmo Mobile 6. Now, if this video helped you on your journey, make sure you hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos around how to use your gimbal, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you're someone who's building a YouTube channel, then make sure you head over to the Creator Film School, which is my course series on how you actually grow a channel and build your audience. But next on your journey when working with this gimbal, you should really check out this video here, which goes through a bunch of different gimbal moves that you can do using the DJI Osmo Mobile 6. I'll see you on that video.